Let's talk about books, baby. Let's talk about you and me. I shouldn't do that. Sorry for the singing. Fina here from Fina Reads, and welcome back to another episode of Book Ramblings, where I do the same that I do in every video. Ramble along about books, give you an update about what I've done in the last 2 weeks, what I'm planning on reading in the last 2 weeks, and let's just get started. The last 2 weeks have been a bit slower when it comes to reading. It was just a lot going on and I didn't get to read as much as I wanted to. But something really exciting happened. I finished Empire in Black and Gold. Can you believe this? I finished the first book of the Shadows and the Ebb. Finally. I feel like I should order a big cake or something. Do you actually need a reason to order cake? I don't think so. Anyway, I finally finished it and wow. It is so good. I'm planning on doing a review for that, so I don't want to talk too much about it. I want to keep all of that for the actual review, probably a bit later in October. But this was an incredible book, and I cannot wait to continue on with this series. So just in case you haven't heard me talk about this quite yet, not that I haven't mentioned this book in the last, 15 videos it feels like. Empire in Black and Gold is Adrian Tchaikovsky's debut series, all of that, and it's the first book in a 10-book series, but it has different arcs, so you can read parts of the series and then come back at a later time, so you don't have to read all of the 10 books. And while you can notice that it is his debut novel from a writing perspective, especially if you've read older books from him, so I read Children of Time before, you can notice a little bit that this is, that he is not as experienced in that, but I'm saying that with a big asterisk because it is still incredible. He just knows how to write. Let's just say that. And he got even better as he wrote more books, if that makes sense. Empire Black and Gold, the first book, kind of introduces you into that world. This is a world full of insect kindred. So you have humans that have insect traits. Some of them can conjure wings. Some of them have abilities to deal with mechanical devices and stuff like that. And you have ancient races. You have kind of newer races. This is a big world with a lot of history, with a lot of culture associated with every individual race or with every individual kindred. And it is just incredible. That's the stuff I love. That's the type of fantasy that I really, really enjoy, when you have an author who can create such an immersive world with such detail and vivid description. It's so good. I mean, it's even better than I was hoping it would be. So book one throws you right into the action. You're in the middle of an attack of a city, and our main character, Stenwald, is trying to stop the wasps from conquering the city, but he and his team pretty quickly realize that this is not going to happen, so he and his team have to retreat. And that's kind of how you get thrown into the story. It's like, oh my god, what's going on here? And then you have a cut to 20 years or something later. Stenwald is now a professor in a university city. You get to know some of his students. And you get to know what he has done over the last 20 years, which was convincing pretty much everyone that there is a war looming with the wasps. And that war is going to be a huge problem because it will basically eradicate the entire other races. The wasps want to take over everything. And from that moment, you kind of start into the story, and there's so much happening. Yeah, I highly recommend it. If you like fantasy series that are immersive and that are really wide from a world building perspective and have a lot of detail when it comes to the different races and to the abilities and all that kind of thing, their history, their beliefs and all that kind of stuff, this is going to be a series for you. I cannot wait to continue. The second book that I read, because after this big one, I was like, okay, am I continuing now with book 2 immediately, or am I reading something a bit shorter? And I ended up deciding for something shorter. So I read The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, which was a buddy read with Michael Nipp's patrons. That was the book that we all voted for. And I've never read Neil Gaiman before, so I had no idea what his writing is about. I had no idea what this book was about, except for the little text in the back that really doesn't tell you anything. And what did I read in the most positive way? It is so incredible, and I don't want to give anything away because I went into it blindly, which I think helped with the excitement that I feel for this book. The book is essentially about a grown-up man who travels back. I think there's a funeral happening. It's not really explained, but I think in a half sentence they said something about a funeral. He is driving back to his childhood home, and he is visiting his neighbor's house and just sits there at the lake or at the pond and remembers a time when he was 7 years old and what happened back then. It was a very short time, maybe a couple of days or something, that he remembers while sitting at that pond. And I did not realize what would happen. I thought this is like a literary fiction or just a regular fiction type of book. It is definitely fantasy. And I think someone called it dark fairy tale type of story. I've never read something like that. Never. And it is so good. It's so hard to describe what this book is without giving anything away. It is so difficult for me to wrap my head around what I actually read there. The one thing I can tell you is I already have other Neil Gaiman books on my list that I'm not going to read. Like Neverwhere is one of the ones that I put on top. Stardust, the Graveyard Book, and then there was another one that I forgot that I also put on my list. Anyway, so Neil Gaiman is an author for me, hands down. This was just so imaginative, and the things that are happening in here are at the same time disgusting, heartwarming, brilliant. I probably can come up with other words. I mean, seriously, if you've never read Neil Gaiman, or if you read one of his, more famous book like American Gods and you didn't like it, I highly recommend reading this one more time. Like, give this a try. It is really short. It's less than 200 pages, and it's just... Does it say everything? So those are the two books that I actually finished in the last 2 weeks. Right now, so like 2 days ago, I started with my next book, which is Getaway by Zoe Stage. And Zoe Stage is a new to me author. I just read Wonderland by her, and I did a review of Wonderland and loved it. That was such a great read. I loved her writing. I loved the atmosphere that she created. So I picked up Getaway. Getaway is about two sisters and one of their friends. They are meeting in Phoenix and are preparing for a week trip of backpacking. And Imogen, I don't know how to pronounce that right. I'd say Imogen, who is one of the sisters. She actually just survived a shooting at a Jewish synagogue and deals with just mental health issues, which is why her other sister, Becky, said, let's do the trip. Let's invite our old friend from school that Imogen is a little bit estranged with at the moment, but let's invite her and let's all go down into the Grand Canyon backpacking for a week. No electronics. Just, everything that fits into our backpacks, that's it. We're not even taking a tent, all those kind of things. So, since this is a horror book, there are probably going to be things happening. So this is going to be a book that I will only read in sunshine and outside and not in the dark while I'm preparing to fall asleep. Probably not a good book for that. But it is a quick read. And again, the writing so far is as great as Wonderland was, so I'm really excited to see how this continues. The other book that I just recently started is A Game of Thrones. That was totally not planned, but that happened because I just joined, what's his channel called? The Fantasy Network, so Jimmy Nutt's Patreon thingy, and he has a monthly meetup with his patrons, just come together and chat about books, essentially. And that was the other day. and he has a Game of Thrones read-along on his channel right now, and we started talking about it. And while we were talking about epic fantasy series and sci-fi series that we love, like the whole group, I just realized how much I actually enjoyed Game of Thrones when I read it way back when. It's a couple of years ago, and I read it in German back then, that I thought, you know what? I kind of want to read it again. I was always thinking, because again, it has been a couple of years ago that I read those 5 books, or 10 in German, and I liked them back then. I didn't love them, but I liked them. And I was always wondering, especially since the whole TV show stuff started, if I would enjoy a reread, and if I would enjoy Game of Thrones or The Song of Ice and Fire as much on a reread. So, you know, long story short, I got a big thing of FOMO and downloaded the book from my library. Because I was like, you know, I don't want to read it in German again because it's 10 books in German. And it's, as you've probably heard me say a couple of times, German is more voluminous, so it would be a higher page count. And I already have so many books on my TBR that have a high page count. I decided to just go with the English version and see if I'm good with that. And so far, I've read the first chapter, and so far, all good. So I will continue with that. Probably while I'm reading Getaway at day, I will read Game of Thrones at night. Maybe that's a good, you know, balance of that. Alright, so that's where I'm at right now. For the next 2 weeks, there are 3 books that I have on my radar. The first book is Isaac Asimov's Foundation, because Game of Thrones is a big chunker, and then I have another big chunker on my next 2 weeks kind of list radar, so I wanted something short. And Foundation is just one of those books that I wanted to read for some time. I know a little bit about what the story is about, probably not even close to enough that I'm going to attempt to explain any of this, but it has been on my radar for a while actually, because my dad kept telling me about how much he liked it when he was a teenager, that he read all of Asimov's book and really enjoyed the writing and the stories and all that kind of stuff. It's one of those, I will try Foundation and either I like it or I don't. That's the other chunker. Because book 1 was so good, I have to continue. I mean, there's just no way around it. I have to read it. And that's, I think, the biggest book in the series, or at least in the first arc that spans the first 4 books. And I need to continue. People, it is not very often, like, I don't know, I can probably count them on 2 hands, the amount of epic fantasy series that have such a tremendous world building with all the details that you need from a character perspective and from a just history perspective and religion perspective. Like, there are not many like that. I have to continue with this. I need to know how this continues. I want to learn. There are 3 races in book 1 that we learned more about in book 1 that I want to learn even more about. The setup in book 1 for those 3 has been really, really good. And then there's one character in here that I wonder what's going to happen. Let's put it that way. I want to know. I want to know so badly, guys. Yes. And the third book that I want to attempt, just to have something different from epic fantasy and sci-fi series and such, is the Angela Merkel biography. Angela Merkel, just in case you don't know, was Germany's chancellor. She just got replaced. Elections were a couple of weeks ago, but because she said she doesn't want to be chancellor anymore. But I always found her fascinating as a person, so I'm excited to dive into her biography, just learn a little bit more about her, because the only thing I know is, you know, the basic high-level stuff, learning more about her life, how she became the person that she became. And I hope the book also talks a little bit about the challenges she was facing as a woman in such a leadership position, and how she addressed those, how she dealt with them. Just something very different between all of this fantasy sci-fi books. Sorry about the rambling, but I mean, you were warned. That's the title of this series, so here we go. Now I want to hear your ramblings though. The question that I have for you guys is, because as I said, I love those epic fantasy series, are there ones that you would recommend? I already have Malazan and Realm of the Elderlings on my radar. What are other big immersive fantasy series that you would recommend to someone like me? I want to know. I just want to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for stopping by, and thanks so much for, following along with my ramblings. If you want more of that, you know how this works. Like, subscribe, the whole enchilada. And then I hope I see you soon with my next video. Have a great rest of your day. Bye!